Chosen one. Have you ever been right on the edge of something at an opportunity? A breakthrough? A moment that felt ordained, and then, suddenly, everything just paused. The door didn't slam shut, but it didn't open either. Instead, time seemed to slow, and what should have taken a day dragged into weeks. What should have been a simple yes became an indefinite maybe. And in the silence that followed, you questioned everything: your decisions, your worth, even your connection to God. Let's talk about that, because that delay, that strange, inexplicable stillness, it wasn't rejection. It wasn't abandonment. It was God placing you in a holding pattern, not as a punishment, but as protection. You weren't being denied. You were being hidden. Chosen one. You must understand this when your calling is high. The warfare is higher. When your light begins to shine brighter, the shadows push back harder. And sometimes, the only way to protect the assignment on your life is to shield you from sight completely. That means pausing you. That means rerouting you. That means pulling you out of the battlefield before the enemy knows you're even armed. But here's the part the world doesn't see to them. It looks like you failed. Like you missed your window. Like you didn't have what it takes. But what they'll never understand, because they don't walk in your frequency, is that delay is sometimes the loudest proof that heaven is guarding your destiny. You see, the enemy operates on sight. He tracks movement. He detects acceleration. And when your momentum starts to align with divine timing, it creates ripples in the spirit realm. Those ripples alert demonic assignments. They stir up jealousy, manipulation, distraction. The enemy doesn't attack when you're idle, he strikes when you're near breakthrough. And that's why God sometimes steps in and hits pause. He's not punishing you. He's hiding you. Not because you're weak, but because you're precious. Not because you were about to fall, but because you were about to rise too fast, too visible, and too close to the enemy's radar. So instead, God put a cloak over your light, not to dim it, but to keep it from being detected too early. And that cloak, it often feels like delay. Let's talk about what that delay feels like, because you know it intimately. You might have felt forgotten. Projects stagnated. Calls stopped. Doors that once seemed open now require a knock you no longer have the strength to offer. Relationships faded. You were ready to launch. But the launch pad disappeared. And in that place of pause, your spirit began to ache. What did I do wrong, you asked? Where did I misstep? Chosen one. Hear this clearly, you didn't misstep. You were marked. And when you're marked by heaven, you don't get to move on your schedule. You move on God's. That delay was an invisible hand pulling you out of the line of fire. That interview that didn't happen, God saw the spiritual snare behind it. That person who ghosted you, they were carrying a contagious spiritual poison. That contract that dissolved last minute, it was wrapped in deception, masked as opportunity. See, one of the hardest truths about walking this path is realizing that divine favor doesn't always feel like favor. Sometimes it feels like loss. Sometimes it feels like isolation. But in truth, it's insulation. God knew what you didn't. While you cried over the detour, heaven rejoiced because you narrowly missed disaster. You weren't denied, you were defended. You weren't stalled, you were sheltered. And the longer you stay aligned with heaven's timing, the more you begin to realize that what looks like delay in the natural is often divine acceleration in disguise. Here's what I need you to remember. The timing of a chosen one is not like the timing of the world. You're not operating on calendar dates. You're operating on kairos moments, those holy, appointed moments in time when everything aligns because God says now. And until that moment arrives, every step forward must be filtered through the Spirit's wisdom. That's why you don't rush. That's why you don't panic. That's why, even when everything seems quiet, you stay anchored. Because quietness in your world often means heaven is busy behind the scenes, restructuring things you'll never see until you're safely out of reach from the coming warfare. Chosen one, you are not late. You are not lazy. You are not confused. You are not cursed. You are being calibrated. Calibrated for spiritual precision, you see. When a sniper prepares to take a shot, they don't rush. They wait. They assess wind speed, distance, movement, because one wrong second and the whole mission fails. That's what God is doing with you. He's aligning you so perfectly, so strategically, that when you finally step forward, no attack can reach you, because the mission will already be accomplished in the spirit realm. You weren't meant to walk into a trap to prove your faith. You were meant to avoid the trap because of your intimacy with the Spirit. Remember Jonah? God delayed his journey through a fish, but the mission was never canceled. Remember Jesus 30 years hidden for 3 years of ministry. Divine delays aren't wasted. They're loaded with power. And you, yes, you are in good company. Let's look again at what's really happening during a divine delay. Heaven doesn't waste time. If you've been paused, there's a purpose. Maybe it's refinement. Maybe you were carrying too many people, and God needed to lighten your load before promotion. Maybe your character was ahead of your emotional boundaries, and God had to slow you down so you wouldn't sabotage your next level. Maybe your eyes were still too trusting, and the enemy had slipped a counterfeit into your camp. Delay exposes what's hiding in your blind spots. It's the grace of God that keeps you in that place until you're fully armored. Because the next level of your mission requires accuracy, discernment, and authority. That kind of power doesn't develop during acceleration. It develops during stillness. Chosen one, I know this waiting hurts. I know you've watched others fly past you. I know you've had to cheer them on while nursing your own deferred dreams. But understand this, their speed is not your measure. Their path is not your lane. And what's for you, what's truly, deeply, divinely for you, won't require you to compete or chase. It will arrive precisely when the warfare has passed, when the terrain has been cleared, and when your soul has been fortified to hold the blessing without breaking under it. So if you're in a delay right now, breathe, because what you call a delay, heaven calls a defense strategy. There are things coming for you that would have broken your spirit if you'd gotten ahead of schedule. There are assignments ahead that require your discernment to be razor sharp. There are spiritual giants ahead that can't be fought with yesterday's weapons. And right now, God is not denying you, He's arming you. You've been chosen, and the chosen are not rushed, they're readied. So hold fast, stay low in the Spirit, maintain your oil, guard your focus, because the delay is temporary, but the glory it's preparing you for is eternal. Your enemies may think you disappeared. But what they don't know is that God just cloaked you in spiritual invisibility, preserved you for the perfect moment, and made sure no weapon formed against you could prosper because you were never in range to begin with. Delay is not your defeat. Delay is your divine disguise. You thought you were stuck, trapped, spinning in circles with no sign of direction. But chosen one, you were never lost, you were hidden. And the one who hid you did it with intentionality, with precision, and with a love so fierce, it refused to let you be exposed to something that would have crushed your calling before it could even take flight. This is the kind of hiding that doesn't make sense to the world, because to them, hiding looks like failure, like regression, like you're wasting time or missing out. But God doesn't hide you because you're falling behind. He hides you because what He placed inside of you is too sacred, too powerful, and too disruptive to the darkness for it to be unleashed prematurely. The world didn't need another visible success. It needed a hidden weapon. And that's what you've become. Understand this: heaven operates with stealth. Not because it's afraid of the enemy, but because it's aware of him. Your mission is too important to be paraded before it's protected. So God will often put you in plain sight and still render you undetectable. Just like He did with Moses, hidden in Pharaoh's palace. Just like He did with David, hidden in the fields while Saul was still king. Just like He did with Jesus, hidden in a carpenter's shop until the fullness of time. God has hidden you in the mundane so that when your moment comes, no one can trace your rise to anything but Him. This is divine camouflage. They saw you, but they didn't see you. They interacted with you, but they never discerned your true essence. They thought you were ordinary, average, just another face in the crowd. But what they didn't know is that heaven had veiled your light just enough to keep you off the radar of those who would try to abort your purpose prematurely. Chosen one, spiritual attacks don't always come in the form of loud warfare. Sometimes they're subtle, strategic, and dangerously timed. The enemy is a student of cycles. He watches your rhythms, your patterns, your spiritual high points. And just when you're on the cusp of alignment, he attempts to interfere. But God, who sees beyond time, intercepts. You don't even know how many ambushes you've avoided simply because your name was left off a list. Your email got buried, or your gut told you not to go. Those weren't accidents. That was divine handwork. You were being shielded from something your spirit couldn't yet articulate. And here's where it gets deeper. God often allows you to feel the tension of the opportunity without granting access. That's intentional. He lets you see it so you'll stay aware. But He keeps you from touching it so you won't be contaminated. Because not every open door is from God. Some are traps dressed up as timing. Some are distractions disguised as destiny. Some are mirrors of what you've prayed for, but they're hollow inside, filled with illusions meant to derail your soul. So what does heaven do? It pulls you back, quietly. Without announcement, you wake up one day and realize the momentum stopped. Your spirit begins to ache for forward motion, but nothing responds. And that's when the questioning starts. Why can't I move? Why does it feel like everyone's leaving me behind? Because you weren't being left behind. You were being kept behind. And that's a holy difference. God places boundaries on those He anoints, not as limitations, but as safeguards. The world sees restriction, but the heavens see refinement. And yes, there's pain in being hidden. There's grief in not being chosen when you know you're called. There's loneliness in being passed over while others are promoted. But remember, this delay doesn't devalue you, and invisibility doesn't negate your impact. Some of your most powerful work is done in the shadows, where no applause can touch your ego, and no spotlight can distract your spirit. That hiddenness trains you. It teaches you to listen deeper, to trust without proof, to walk without maps, and most importantly, to anchor in God's voice, not man's validation. Because when your time comes, and it will come, you won't need their endorsement. You won't seek their approval. You'll walk in authority that was forged in the silence. And that's the kind of authority hell fears. You see, when you're visible too early, you become a target. When you rise without roots, you topple. But when God hides you first, He ensures that when you emerge, your foundation is unshakable. Chosen one, you've been praying for acceleration. But heaven's been preparing you for preservation. Because elevation without preservation is exposure. And exposure without preparation is sabotage. That's why the blessing hasn't come when you expected. That's why the promotion didn't arrive on schedule. That's why the relationship didn't blossom despite all the signs. God had to hold it back, not because He didn't want you to have it, but because He didn't want it to have you before you were ready. He didn't want you to build an empire that your emotional wounds couldn't sustain. He didn't want you to rise in front of people who only celebrated you to sabotage you later. He had to hide you to heal you. Let that settle in your spirit. God hid you because He was healing you in secret. He was mending fractures you didn't even know were there. Clearing generational debris from your soul. Teaching you the language of discernment. Stretching your capacity to carry power without being corrupted by it. You were asking to lead nations, but God was preparing you to survive betrayals. You were ready to speak, but heaven needed to make sure your words wouldn't bleed from unhealed places. You are not behind. You're in hiding, and that hiding is sacred. It's where God reveals the true blueprint, not the one you had, but the one He wrote before you were born. That's where He whispers secrets of your assignment. That's where He teaches you the weight of being a remnant. That's where He strips away every false identity until only the anointed version of you remains. So when you feel invisible, rejoice. It means you're being refined in holy fire. When they overlook you, smile. It means God still has His cloak over you. When nothing moves, rest. It means you're in the womb of purpose, being formed for something that eyes haven't seen and ears haven't heard. And when the time comes, when the enemy has been disarmed, the terrain cleared, the counterfeit connections removed, you will be revealed, not introduced, revealed. Because chosen ones are not launched like brands. They're unveiled like prophecy. And in that moment, everyone who overlooked you will understand they were never rejecting you. They were just never assigned to recognize you. Because only those tuned to heaven's frequency can see who you really are. Remember this, you were shielded in plain sight, and no attack that missed you during this delay will ever reach you again. Now, let's go deeper into what you were actually being protected from. Because chosen one, while you were still, while you were wondering, grieving, doubting, there was a full-scale spiritual assault being prepared against you. An attack so layered, so calculated, and so well disguised that had God not stepped in with that divine delay, your spirit would have been blindsided and possibly shattered. Let me tell you something only the spiritually awake understand. The enemy doesn't waste resources on the irrelevant. He targets what's potent. He studies what's holy. He sends reinforcements when he senses a shift in the atmosphere around someone marked. And you, chosen one, are marked. You were on the brink of movement. In the spirit, your assignment was starting to vibrate. The energy around your name was changing. Light was breaking through your aura. Your prayers were becoming sharper, your discernment more acute. And in the unseen realm, that movement was like an alarm. It echoed through spiritual dimensions, and the kingdom of darkness took notice. That's when the attack was launched, not in your lowest moment, but in your moment of rising. But here's the grace before the first dart could reach you. God hid you. There's a reason Scripture says no weapon formed against you shall prosper. It never promised the weapon wouldn't form. It promised it wouldn't succeed. And sometimes, the way God fulfills that promise is by removing you from the battlefield entirely before the first arrow even flies. You think you just missed a phone call, or that a job fell through, or that a relationship went quiet. But in the unseen realm, God was pulling you out of range. There are layers of protection you'll never even be aware of. Conversations that could have cursed your spirit but were canceled. Meetings that would have drained your energy but were delayed. Connections that looked promising but were toxic to your divine frequency, and heaven made sure they never latched on. You didn't dodge the attack because of your wisdom. You didn't avoid disaster because you were quick. You were spared because you were hidden. Let's sit in that truth. The attack never touched you because you were never where the enemy expected you to be. He launched a strike toward your last known location, toward the old version of you, toward the visible you. But God had already moved you, already rerouted your path, already shifted your environment, your mindset, your energy field. What the enemy targeted was a ghost, an outdated imprint of your frequency. And that's why it failed. This is spiritual strategy. The delay you felt in the natural was divine misdirection in the supernatural. While you cried in your waiting room, God was leading the enemy in circles. And let's be clear, this was no ordinary opposition. It was massive. It had your patterns studied. It had people positioned. It had traps customized for your specific weaknesses. It came for your mind, your emotions, your credibility. The goal wasn't just to hurt you, it was to distort your identity so that you'd sabotage your own calling. Because the enemy can't take your anointing. But if he can confuse you enough, he can convince you to walk away from it yourself. But God said no, not this one, not this time. So he made your schedule inconvenient. He made your momentum pause. He made you feel stuck, not because you were, but because he needed you to stand still long enough to let the danger pass. And I need you to hear this part in your spirit. The silence you felt was actually volume in heaven. The stillness you endured was turbulence in the spirit realm. While nothing moved around you, everything was being rearranged for you. Sometimes, God fights battles without your involvement. Not because you're unworthy of the fight, but because your mission is too critical to risk damage. You are not a foot soldier. You are a commander in spiritual realms. And commanders don't get thrown into every skirmish. Their presence is reserved. Their movements are protected. Their assignments are watched closely. Chosen one, you were never being ignored. You were being guarded. And yes, the enemy was coming hard. Coming through discouragement. Through familiar spirits. Through false confirmation. Through delays designed to drain your hope. Through people sent to subtly pull you into distractions. Through open doors with poisoned hinges. But God blocked it all. And he did it without your awareness. Because sometimes the greatest display of divine love is protection that feels like disappointment. Let's not gloss over that some of what you grieved was never supposed to stay with you anyway. The relationships that slipped through your fingers, they carried spiritual residue from your past. The partnerships that almost happened, they had compromise written in fine print. The platforms that denied you, they couldn't handle the weight of your truth. And so heaven intervened not with lightning and thunder, but with delay, a sacred pause, a divine timeout. You didn't fail. You didn't mishear. You didn't miss it. You were hidden during high-level warfare because God was handling the attack without asking you to fight it. And this is where the maturity of a chosen one is tested. Because when you know you're being prepared for greatness, but you're forced into obscurity, will you still trust the plan? When the Spirit says wait and everything in your flesh screams, go, will you anchor in obedience? When your logic demands proof, but your soul only has whispers, will you believe the voice of God over the silence of circumstances? This is what makes you different. This is what separates you from the crowd. Not your knowledge, not your status, but your ability to discern the divine strategy in what looks like a setback. You weren't delayed. You were repositioned. You weren't blocked. You were rerouted. And here's the confirmation look at what didn't happen. That breakdown you feared, it never came. That betrayal you were bracing for, it got exposed before it could take root. That emotional spiral you thought would consume you, it lifted unexpectedly. That's not coincidence. That's divine evidence. You were kept in the shadows because your enemies had prepared a stage of sabotage. But God pulled the curtains down before the scene could unfold. And when it was all said and done, your spirit emerged untouched, untainted, unharmed. Because that's what happens when you're hidden under the wings of the Most High. So if you've been feeling the heaviness of that delay, if you've been walking through fog, second-guessing everything, wondering why nothing is moving, and praying for clarity that hasn't yet arrived, take heart. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are not being punished. You are being shielded from the kind of warfare that would have poisoned your purpose. You are being held back, not because you're not ready, but because the terrain ahead is being cleared by forces you can't even see. Heaven is working for you in secret. God is hiding you from an attack that never even had a chance to land because He took you out of range before it ever launched. You're being protected from what was sent to dismantle your soul. And when the time is right, when the atmosphere is clean, when the traps have been dismantled and your armor is complete, you won't need to ask for permission. You'll simply move, and nothing will stop you. They looked for you, chosen one, but they couldn't find you. Not because you were lost, not because you were inactive, not because you'd given up, but because your frequency was rerouted by divine strategy. Your visibility in the Spirit was dimmed, your energy signature recalibrated, your light wrapped in a layer of holy stealth. And while the world was busy trying to track the old version of you, God had already shifted your coordinates. You were nowhere near where they left you, and that was by design. Let's break it down. There are spiritual principles at play in your walk that others won't understand because they're not walking your path. When you carry a divine assignment, your movements become heaven-governed. That means your positioning, your connections, your seasons of rest. Even your delays, they're not random. They are calculated strategies from the throne room. And one of the most powerful strategies God uses to preserve His anointed is this inaccessibility. He takes you off the grid. Not just physically, but energetically, emotionally, spiritually. People try to reach the old you, and they can't feel you anymore. They try to provoke you the way they used to. But your reactions are no longer available. They gossip, hoping to stir your spirit, but the bait doesn't land. The enemy plants old triggers, expecting a response, but finds silence instead. Why? Because the version of you they're attacking doesn't exist anymore. They can't touch you because they're targeting a past identity, and God has already evolved you out of their reach. This is the technology of the Spirit, an upgrade in frequency so complete. It renders you untraceable by anything not aligned with your current assignment. And yes, that includes people. There are some who used to have access to you, familiarity with you, power over you, but in this new season, they find themselves confused, irritated, frustrated. They don't understand why their words don't land like they used to, why their tactics don't sway you, why you no longer react to their chaos. Chosen one. That's not just maturity, that's spiritual concealment. God cloaked your spirit in discernment, raised your vibration, and removed the spiritual permissions others once had to manipulate your peace. That's why they can't find you anymore. You are still here, but your positioning has changed. Your essence is hidden behind layers of divine covering. And the enemy, he hates that, because he was counting on your pattern. See, the enemy doesn't just track your actions, he studies your tendencies. He monitors your emotional triggers, your moments of weakness, your cycles of doubt. He times his attacks based on your spiritual rhythm. He hopes that if he stirs just the right memory or puts the right voice in your ear, he can bring back the old you, the reactive you, the doubtful you, the fearful you. But that version has been deactivated. Your hiding wasn't just physical. It was energetic, dimensional, a frequency shift so real. Even the enemy had to recalibrate, and by the time he did, you were already gone. This is the anointing of inaccessibility. It's when God makes you unreachable, not to isolate you, but to insulate you. He cuts off access from the wrong people so the right anointing can grow undisturbed. He ends conversations that no longer serve your elevation. He shuts doors that lead to cycles, not callings. And yes, it's lonely. Yes, it can be confusing. But don't mistake protected isolation for abandonment. You weren't left behind. You were led away. There is a difference. You're not hiding in fear, you're hiding in preparation. And because you've been repositioned in the spirit, only those with the right vibration, the right frequency, and the right assignment can reach you now. That's why your old friends fell off. That's why certain environments became unbearable. That's why things that once fed you now leave you empty. You've been spiritually upgraded, and the old matrix can no longer host your presence. They can't find you because you're not on the same wavelength anymore. Let's take a deeper look at this when God elevates your frequency. He doesn't just raise your mindset, he alters your resonance. That's why even your silence feels different. Why your presence shifts rooms. Why some people feel uncomfortable around you now, even when you're not saying a word, not saying a, because your energy carries truth. And truth disrupts illusion. So what happens next? The ones who are not aligned will either try to reconnect out of nostalgia or attack out of confusion. They'll accuse you of changing, of being distant, of acting brand new. And they'll be right, but not in the way they think. You didn't change for attention. You transformed for assignment. You didn't disconnect to punish. You were called away to be recalibrated. And no matter how much they search for the old you, God will not allow them to find what he's already buried. This is not a season of explanation. It's a season of elevation. You owe no one an apology for being hidden. You owe no one a justification for your stillness. You don't have to defend your absence to people who were never meant to journey with you into this next dimension, because here's what they don't know. While they thought you were fading, God was fortifying. While they assumed you were quitting, God was qualifying. While they looked around and couldn't find you, God was looking within and remaking you. And now, what they tried to touch won't respond. What they tried to curse won't engage. What they tried to trigger has no access point. You are hidden in God, shielded by wisdom, surrounded by light. This is not abandonment. This is divine encryption. Your path is encoded. Your steps are cloaked. Your progress is undetectable until it's unstoppable. That's why you don't need to announce your next move. You don't need to publicize your process. When God is your covering, your impact doesn't need confirmation. Your authority will be revealed in your fruit, not your followers, in your presence, not your platform. And when the time comes for your unveiling, there will be no confusion, because the atmosphere itself will confirm it. Until then, stay hidden, stay protected. Let them wonder. Let them guess. Let them assume you've disappeared. All the while, you are being refined, empowered, anointed, readied. And when you emerge, it won't be with fanfare. It'll be with fire. Because chosen one, when God hides you, He's not just concealing. He's consecrating. He's setting you apart so that when you speak, dimensions shift. When you walk, atmospheres bend. And when you rise, the enemy will realize too late that he missed his window because you were never where he aimed. You were above it all, walking under the shadow of the Almighty, unreachable by the plans of hell. So stay unbothered in your hiddenness, because what they can't touch, they can't tarnish, and what they can't see, they can't stop. There's a sacred ache that comes with being hidden. Chosen one. A deep, quiet grief that no one around you seems to understand. You smile, you function, you show up, but inside, you carry the weight of divine isolation. It's not depression, it's not defeat. It's the hollow stillness of knowing you're called, anointed, awakened, yet unseen. That's the pain of hiddenness, and it is very real. You look around, and others seem to rise with ease. Their efforts gain attention, their names are celebrated, their voices are amplified. Meanwhile, you who have labored in silence, who have obeyed, who have wept and warred and waited, remain in the shadows. It's not envy. It's not pride. It's that deep, internal wondering, why not yet? Lord, but here's the truth that only the truly chosen understand. Hiddenness is not a punishment. It's a promotion in disguise, because to be hidden by God is to be set apart for something sacred. It's to be kept out of reach, not from blessings, but from corruption, not from movement, but from misalignment. It's the Father saying, I love you too much to let you be seen before you're sealed. And sealing is not a light process. It requires breaking, molding, testing. It pulls things out of you you didn't even know were there, old belief systems, unhealed traumas, subtle idolatries, things that look like strength but are rooted in fear. God will not allow you to walk into your calling carrying the weight of unfinished wounds. So He hides you, and in that hiddenness, He confronts the part of you that still doubts your worth without applause. He isolates the voice in your mind that still needs validation to feel valuable. He breaks your dependency on external confirmation so that when He finally puts you on the stage of your assignment, no rejection can shake you, and no praise can seduce you. But that process, it hurts, because the silence is loud. The obscurity is humbling. You start to question whether you ever heard God at all. The enemy whispers that you're forgotten, that you missed your chance, that you should have moved faster, louder, harder. But those are lies built to push you out of alignment. God doesn't need you to hustle your way into destiny. He needs you to yield. Because what you're carrying is not common, and the preparation it requires cannot be rushed. Chosen one, you have to know this. Your hiddenness is holy. It's an anointed pause, a consecrated covering, a spiritual cocoon where transformation is happening at a depth too sacred for the public eye. Butterflies don't blossom on open branches. They cocoon in darkness, in silence, in stillness. And when it's time, no one can stop them from flying. Likewise, you are not being held back. You are being held close. God is drawing you into Himself not to restrict you, but to redefine you. He's showing you who you are without the noise, who you are without the performance, who you are without the platform, because your identity must be rooted in intimacy, not visibility. If you don't know who you are in the secret place, the spotlight will confuse you. The opinions of others will derail you. You'll mistake applause for assignment and feedback for direction. So God allows the pain of hiddenness to strip away every false identity. And yes, it gets lonely. You might feel like no one gets you, like no one sees you, like you're speaking a spiritual language few around you understand. But that's because you're being recalibrated to resonate only with what's true. And most of the world, it's still dancing with illusion. So yes, your circle may shrink. Yes, conversations may dry up. Yes, you may feel the sting of being uninvited, overlooked, dismissed. But don't confuse social isolation with spiritual demotion. Sometimes God removes the crowd so you can hear His voice clearly. Because the clarity you need right now is not external, it's eternal. And chosen one, what He's revealing to you in this hidden place is priceless. It's the kind of clarity that will become your compass, the kind of truth that will hold you steady when storms hit and critics rise, the kind of discernment that will prevent you from laying hands on what looks like favor but carries hidden curses. But He couldn't give you that kind of insight in the noise. He had to draw you into stillness. That's why the old ways stopped working. That's why your usual sources of inspiration dried up. That's why the platforms where you once thrived suddenly stopped bearing fruit. Because this level of transformation doesn't happen on stages. It happens in caves. And caves are where kings are forged. Ask David, anointed in front of his family. Yes, but shaped in hiding, running, hunted, misunderstood. But it was in those caves where he learned God's voice, not just His promise. Where he learned worship in the wilderness, not just victory in the palace. That's what you're learning now. To sing in shadows, to praise when nothing moves, to pray when no one claps, to speak truth even when your voice shakes and your audience is gone. You're learning that your identity isn't based on who accepts you, but who called you. And God called you. That calling didn't expire because people stopped checking on you. It didn't weaken because the momentum slowed. It didn't disappear because the room got quiet. If anything, the quiet confirmed it. Because in the absence of applause, what remains is what's real. And what's real is that you're chosen not for popularity, not for performance, but for purpose. And purpose often begins in private. So let the hiddenness do its work. Let the pruning continue. Let the silence refine your listening. Let the solitude purify your motives. Because when you come out of this season, you won't just emerge, you'll be revealed. And those who once overlooked you won't recognize you, not because you changed for them, but because you aligned with who you were always meant to be. This is the cost of the mantle you carry. This is the fire that forges warriors. This is the crushing that produces the anointing. So yes, chosen one, the pain of hiddenness is real. But so is the promise on the other side of it. And it's coming. You're not waiting in vain. You're not being broken just to be broken. You're being made chosen one. By now you understand that your hiddenness wasn't just about protection. It was about preparation. But there's another layer that many overlook. When God withholds you from the next stage, from the opportunity, from the people or places you thought were meant for you, it's not only because there's danger ahead. Sometimes, it's because there's still too much within you that would sabotage the blessing if you received it too soon. Because here's a hard truth a spiritually mature must face. God withholds what he intends to preserve. And when he withholds you, it's because he's doing a holy reconstruction on the inside, stripping away what cannot survive where you're going, rebuilding what must be unshakable in the environment you're destined to impact. This isn't rejection, it's renovation. You've been asking for elevation, but what you may not have realized is that true elevation requires capacity. And capacity is only developed through pressure, through waiting, through restructuring. You've had the vision, the anointing, even the desire. But desire without discipline is dangerous. Vision without inner healing is volatile. Calling without character becomes combustible. So God said, wait not because he changed his mind, but because he needed to expand your spirit. Wait not because you failed the test, but because the next test is greater, and he's preparing you to pass it with authority. Wait not because others are more worthy, but because your impact is more dangerous to darkness, to strongholds, to spiritual systems that have been standing for generations. You weren't ready then, not because you were wrong, but because you were still becoming, and he loved you too much to let you run ahead with undeveloped tools. He would rather disappoint your timeline than allow your gift to detonate in your hands from premature exposure. So he withheld, and you wrestled. You asked, why me? Why does the vision burn so clearly, yet remain so far away? Why does my soul feel ready while the doors remain closed? Here's why. Chosen one, because your soul felt ready, but your foundation still needed fortifying. You can't carry divine authority on fractured pillars. You can't sustain kingdom influence with a leaky spirit. So while you waited, God was sealing the cracks, the ones no one could see, the ones hidden under your gifts, beneath your knowledge, behind your confidence. Those fractures came from childhood trauma, from old betrayals, from generational patterns you vowed to break but hadn't yet been delivered from. And if God had launched you before healing them, they would have burst open at the moment of your elevation. So instead of sending you forward, he drew you deeper, into solitude, into silence, into the layers of your soul that needed restoration. And that chosen one is the beauty of a God who knows you better than you know yourself. He won't give you a platform that would crush you. He won't pour out increase if your character can't hold it. He won't send people to follow you if your integrity isn't yet anchored. He rebuilds you in secret because what is built in secret, the enemy cannot sabotage. This reconstruction looks like breakdown at first, like everything's falling apart. Relationships ended, dreams delayed, resources dried up. But you weren't being dismantled to be destroyed. You were being reset. Your identity was being rerouted not in titles, not in relationships, not in accomplishments, but in truth, in him. Because only when your identity is anchored in God can your purpose truly flourish. And so the Spirit began to reveal things to you about who you are, about who you're not, about what you're really called to do, versus what you were taught you should do. The clarity hurt at first, didn't it? Because it pulled you away from the familiar. It forced you to confront where you'd been self-abandoning in the name of loyalty. It showed you where you'd been shrinking to stay included, where you'd been performing just to feel worthy, where you'd been dimming your truth to keep peace with people who never truly saw you. But that's the point of divine withholding. It doesn't just protect, it purifies. It strips the layers until all that's left is the anointed version of you. The version God intended when He formed you. The version that is bold, healed, whole, and holy. Not perfect, but purified and chosen one. That version is rising. You can feel it now. Your discernment is sharper. Your tolerance for distractions is lower. You crave peace more than popularity. You speak less but say more. You walk slower but carry weight. You smile not to please, but to release light. That's how you know the delay is ending. Not because the world finally noticed you, but because you've noticed yourself. The real you, the healed you, the matured you, the ready you. And when that version of you is fully formed, the door will open. And when it does, it won't just be any door. It will be the one that was always meant for you. The one that no man could open and no demon could close. The one that was preserved while you were being prepared. And you'll walk through it, not striving, not begging, not questioning, but gliding in the grace that comes from being refined by delay. You'll realize that what you once called loss was actually alignment. What you mourned was mercy. What you fought against was favor in disguise. So now, chosen one, let the world keep rushing. Let others climb ladders not built for them. Let them chase platforms while God builds your palace in secret. Because your silence is sacred. Your withholding is divine. And the blessing ahead, it's heavy, it's holy, and it's yours. But only when the version of you that can carry it has been made whole. And that's what's been happening all this time. In your waiting, in your weeping, in your wondering. You weren't withering, you were becoming, and soon you'll look back and thank God for every delay. Every door that didn't open. Every connection that ghosted you. Every opportunity that passed. Because had they accepted you then, they would have met a version of you that couldn't sustain what's coming now. But this version is unshakable. Because it was rebuilt by God's own hand. Chosen one. This is the moment you've been prepared for, not through applause, not through ease, but through pressure, through delay, through the sacred silence that reshaped your soul. And now, as the divine delay lifts, you are not simply returning to your path, you are stepping into it with a new weight, a new clarity, a new authority. The delay was never the destination. It was the passageway. And now that the unseen war has quieted, and the enemies have lost your signal, heaven is signaling your release. This is the shift. You can feel it, can't you? Your body is lighter. Your discernment is keener. You're no longer grasping for answers, you're carrying peace, even in the absence of details. That's because the version of you that entered the delay has been completely transformed by it. You didn't just survive the hidden season, you were reforged in it. And now, God is saying go. Go forth in the fullness of who you are. Go forth not with insecurity, but with identity. Go forth not with fear, but with fire. Because the threat that warranted your concealment has passed. The schemes, the spiritual surveillance, the coordinated distractions, they've all been scattered. They couldn't touch you. Because while they aimed for you, God moved you out of range and stripped them of access. That was the purpose of the delay. But now you are untouchable. And that's why your release won't look like everyone else's. It won't be flashy. It won't come with trumpets. It'll come as confirmation. In your spirit. In your dreams. In the sudden alignment of things that once resisted you. Doors that were once bolted will swing open with ease. Conversations you had to force before will now flow with favor. Opportunities you were denied will now ask for your presence. Not because you changed to fit them, but because you became the version of yourself that was always meant to receive them. This is what divine timing looks like: unforced access. No striving, no manipulation, just movement. And when you move, hell will tremble. Because they remember the old you, the one they thought they could stop. But they have no strategy for the you who's emerging now. The one who walks in silence, speaks in fire, and carries the oil of the refined. This new you don't just pray, you command atmospheres. You don't just speak, you shift frequencies. You don't just walk into rooms, you interrupt darkness, because your presence is no longer familiar. It's anointed. You don't owe explanations to anyone confused by your stillness. You don't need validation from those who lost access to your energy. Let them question. Let them wonder. Let them scroll through the old version of you, trying to find something that no longer exists. You've outgrown their expectations. You've transcended their judgments. You've elevated beyond their reach, because what God has built in secret, He now intends to display in power, but not for your ego, for His glory. This unveiling is not about proving anything to anyone. It's about fulfilling everything He planted inside of you. So don't shrink now. Don't play small to make others comfortable. Don't hold back just because your expansion makes the unawakened nervous. You didn't go through that delay just to step timidly into your destiny. You went through it so you could carry it with courage, with integrity, with truth. And now that your time has come, you must remember not everyone will celebrate your release. Some will resent it. Some will question how you made it through. Some will even try to attach themselves to your light. Not because they honor it, but because they want to manipulate it. This is where discernment must walk beside your destiny. This is where boundaries protect your breakthrough. You can be loving and still say no. You can be kind and still be clear. You can be generous and still guard your oil. Because not everyone has earned the right to walk with you in this next season. Your hidden season wasn't just a pause, it was a pruning. And if God removed people then, don't try to reattach them now. Who fell off was never part of the mission. Who ghosted you was never assigned to your frequency. Who rejected you was merely an echo of what you were never meant to carry. Let them go. Bless them if you must, but leave them behind. Your hands must be empty of the past to fully embrace what's coming. And what's coming, chosen one, is more than restoration. It's recompense. It's not just what you lost, it's what was stored up while you waited. Spiritual reward, kingdom resources, strategic alliances, divine platforms, healing beyond what you asked for. Joy that doesn't just visit, it abides. Peace that surpasses understanding. Wisdom that cannot be counterfeited. Power that doesn't come from titles, but from truth. That's what's being released now. And you're ready for it. Because the delay didn't disqualify you, it certified you. You passed the test. You endured the pruning. You obeyed when no one was watching. You stayed aligned when it would have been easier to quit. And heaven took notice. Which is why now, when you speak, things will shift. When you pray, things will move. When you decree, things will manifest. Not because you're special in the world's eyes, but because you were chosen in heaven's courts. You carry that weight now, and the earth is groaning for what's inside of you. So rise, walk forward in the fullness of your authority. Declare your space, activate your purpose, move with power. And remember, you weren't delayed to be denied. You were delayed because what you carry is so rare, so precious, so dangerous to darkness, that it had to be perfectly timed for the exact moment it would be most effective. And that moment is now, chosen one. Let this settle deep into your spirit. You were never forgotten, never overlooked, never dismissed by the one who knit your soul together before the foundations of this world. You were held, sheltered, protected in the cleft of the rock while the storm passed and the enemy searched unsuccessfully for your light. Every tear you cried in secret, heaven caught. Every whispered prayer when words failed, heaven recorded. Every time you chose obedience over ease, truth over convenience, surrender over pride, heaven rejoiced. And now, The seal has been broken. The timing is ripe. The shift is here. Move with confidence. But don't rush. Walk with power, but remain yielded. Speak with clarity, but stay in compassion. You were anointed not just to rise, but to reign with humility. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button, like the video, drop a comment below, let us know what hit home, and more than anything, share this with someone else who's been waiting in the dark, unsure if they're seen, unsure if their delay meant disqualification. Remind them, as you've now been reminded, delay is not denial. It is divine design. God bless you.